Hey everyone, welcome back to the Sober Witch Life, Sunshine's magical guide to a magical recovery. Yeah, welcome back. I'm so excited to be here. If you joined us for last week's episode, you're going to hear that this year we're introducing a new type, a new style, and those episodes are going to be with my partner. We're going to be talking a little bit more in length around some things that you can do magic after alcohol. That's in essence what the episodes are called. So, how do you keep that magic in your life, even though we deluded ourselves that alcohol somehow brought it in beforehand? But you will always have me every other week, just you and I. And we're going to talk today about a topic that's been on my mind pretty much for the last couple of weeks. I should say, really, the last 12 days. And we're talking about the truth, the underlying truth of failure in recovery. And the reason that it's been on my mind is because, I belong to a lot of Facebook groups. I belong to some Reddit groups that are talking about sobriety and recovery. And it's just, I'm seeing it. I'm seeing it show up of, hey, I started this new year. I'm trying it, new year, new me. And even have started to see some of the, I only had a couple of days and I failed. I've only had 2 weeks and I failed, and it just, it hurts. It hurts to see that because I know the pain and I know the suffering that goes along with it. So we'll start off with a little story time. I think it's only been maybe in one of the episodes that I talked about in December. I don't know, maybe it was even on a one of my live calls within the Recovery Coven, where I finally realized how many failures I had in recovery. And looking back, I talk about when I stepped into recovery, it was 2019. That's when I hit my rock bottom in October 9th of 2019. But the reality is, I knew that I had a fucked up relationship with alcohol for a really long time. I glamorized it though. I took it as a source of pride that I could drink a whole lot. I could drink anybody under the table, so to speak. And, it was normalized. It was normalized. The drinking, the excessive alcohol, it was normalized. My father was an alcoholic, is an alcoholic, right? I don't believe he stepped into his own recovery, even though he says he doesn't drink anymore. But I look back and over my entire drinking career, right? Because it was, by golly, a career from 8 years old until 40, retired at 40. Um, And there were a lot of times where I said I was going to stop. I was going to stop for an extended period of time. I was going to give it 30 days. I was going to give it 90 days, and if for no real reason, no real why, except I knew in my subconscious that it was fucked up and there was something wrong with the way that I was consuming and, my relationship with alcohol wasn't helping. I'm sure if I had a better memory of it, there were some times that, made me really hesitate, putting myself in situations. I had a very promiscuous 20s, and found myself in some situations after drinking where I wished I wouldn't have. I never thought of it that way, but subconsciously, I think I knew it was wrong. There might have been some times where, I'd consumed alcohol and made the very fucking stupid decision to get behind the vehicle, the wheel, and realizing that I shouldn't. So there may have been these things that said I really shouldn't be drinking, but I don't ever have a memory of a solid why. And then we talk about all the different ways that I tried to moderate. I'm only going to drink wine. I'm only going to drink 2 drinks. I'm only going to do, vodka and club soda. I'm only going to do beer. I'm only going to drink on Friday and Saturday nights. Whatever it may be. I will tell you by the end of it, when I was in the throes of my like really bad addiction, my partner and I, he loved it. He himself was an addict. My partner at that time, rest in peace. He's, not in this world anymore. But he was also an addict. And so by golly, was he ecstatic that he had somebody that would drink with him, right? And By the end, I would start my Saturday and Sundays, right? I was always had a full-time job, always very focused on work, always very proud of my corporate career. So my drug and alcohol, so to speak, life never really impacted that, meaning I didn't smoke pot on the job. I didn't drink on the job. I never let a hangover keep me from going into work. But by the end, I was waking up on Saturdays or Sundays or on my day off, and I would start with Bailey's in my coffee. Around lunchtime, we were often at a bar or at the house cracking open a beer around lunch. Very common to have a shot and a beer. And it would continue that way, probably until we fell asleep. Now, mind you, it might only be throughout that day 2 shots and 3 beers in a course of, I don't know, 10 hours. But it was the highest alcohol concentration beer you could get, right? Loved me some really strong beer. And the shots were always going to be Crown Royal Apple was the favorite at the end. We were spending probably around $300 every other week on our alcohol stash at the house, let alone what we were going out and spending, right? And looking back, the wildest part of it all was I literally watched my father on his deathbed from alcohol addiction, right? In 2017. I watched him almost die, right? We were literally talking about putting him onto hospice. And even knowing that that was what got him there, right? The alcohol consumption, the daily alcohol consumption, even knowing that was exactly why he was there, even knowing that it was my own fate that I was seeing in front of me, I still continued to drink for another 2 years and failed moderating at that time. But let's be real, I convinced myself that the situation that was going on in my life was too stressful for me to stop drinking. Looking back, I'm just like, oh, you silly human being. Silly human being, our addiction demons can take a hold of us and convince us so many ways to not step into the path of recovery. Right. Why I'm sharing all of this with you isn't to talk just about a relapse, though, because there's a high probability that you've relapsed in some way, shape, or form through your recovery journey. I don't remember exactly what the statistic is, but it's pretty high up there. I mean, we're talking like 80% of folks, and if you had accurate, I would probably say you'd be close to 95 to 100. The likelihood that somebody would have decided at one point through their, addiction career to just stop and then they never ever step back into it, I would question um, whether or not they truly identified as an addict, right? Like if that was their actual story, right? Because addiction is a demon. It is a beast, right? But it's not the fact that you've relapsed that I want you to focus on, right? The underlying truth in failure in recovery, so to speak, a relapse, is that that's not a that's not a failure. Relapse is not a failure, right? And the scary part about it is not enough people understand that what you should be focusing on, and I'm going to remove that word should. What I'd strongly encourage, what you would benefit the most from focusing on, isn't the truth that you've relapsed. It's the truth that the shame and the guilt that you're feeling afterward is going to have a very, very strong impact on you. Those emotions are considered low vibrational. Number one, low vibrational emotions can impact our magic. Our ability to do any type of magical work, right? Especially work for ourselves, tends to be very limited, right? And the reason why the shame and guilt sets in is because we feel like we're failing, like we're literally failing, like we're on a path to failure. Failure meaning, you know, never, not able to succeed, right? You're failing yourself, you're failing your loved ones, you're failing those that helped you, you're failing those that stuck their neck out for you, right? And you may find that you get caught up in those stories. It's not a failure. You're human. You will make mistakes. And each mistake is an opportunity to learn. The truth is, the only time that we can ever fail, so to speak, is by giving up. So every single mistake, every time that you relapse, you have an opportunity to learn. You get to learn what sets you off. What was your trigger? What brought you to that place? Why was it that you decided to pick up a drink again, you pick up a drug again, you picked up whatever it is that again, right? Learn what set you off, learn what your trigger is. Create a plan so that it does not happen again. Don't go to the place. Don't pick up the thing. Don't talk to the person. Don't see the person. Whatever it is, have somebody that you can call. Reach out to a sober group. Reach out to a sober community. I don't care what that plan is. Create a plan. We have to make a change in our life in order to get a different life, right? From a magical perspective, what can you do about it? My strongest suggestion is to create a ritual to release that shame and guilt. It's the same thing that I did. My first year in recovery, I think it took me probably about 3 months, right? It took me to get out of like the daily crying from all the shame and guilt of what I'd done to my partner in my rock bottom, let alone all of the shame and guilt that was just everything else. Like I finally came out of this crying, tearing, snotting, 90 days, so to speak, and realized that I didn't want to hold on to that shame and guilt anymore, that it was dangerous. So create a ritual to release that shame and guilt. And I'd strongly recommend to keep it simple and make it something that you can do every single day. For me, it was yoga. I used yoga, right? We hold on to shame and guilt within our sacral chakra and, bit into our solar plexus. So I would have an entire sequence yoga series that I would do, basically the whole like sun salutation with some variations into it. One of them was the pigeon pose, right? Where you're laying on the ground, putting one like kind of lay angled up in front of you, releasing, really opening up that hip abductor, opening up that hip. On the right side, I would release shame and I'd move it to the left and I'd release guilt and I would visualize that shame and guilt coming out, right? That shame and guilt releasing and coming out of my body. And as I sat in these moments, I would often start to get these, images, these memories that would pop up around the shame and the guilt that I was feeling. Sometimes it was related to things that were happening right then and there. Sometimes it was, based upon that rock bottom. Sometimes it was lots of things in my past. And I would watch it just move out of my body, just like an energetic. It would release out of my body. And at some point, I started to, when I felt confident enough, releasing it and watching it change in front of me, that energetic change and shift and turn into like warm, golden, loving energy. And then I would pull it right back in. The entire shame and guilt part of my ritual, that yoga sequence that I would do is probably about 5 minutes at most. At most, right? So a 5-minute ritual that you could do every single day to release the shame and to release the guilt. Do it every day for 30 days and see how your energetics shift. I did that for probably about a year. I think it was maybe 9 months. I think I started at the beginning of February, end of January, beginning of February in 2020. And I want to say all the way until probably October of the next year. Right. And I shifted and changed some things in my 1 year sober anniversary. And today it's very rare that I have feelings of shame and guilt that set into me and I'm not able to quickly move them out. The reality, my dear friends, if you don't deal with this shame and this guilt, is you are liable to step onto a path that leads you away from your recovery. You're liable to be overcome by it, overwhelmed by it, to continue to suffer. That's the truth there. When we have this shame and guilt, we are in a place of suffering. And sometimes we feel like we need to suffer, right? As human beings, we feel like, that's kind of the thing about shame and guilt. You're holding on to it and, you feel like you deserve it. You need to release it. You do not deserve to sit and linger in the feelings of shame and guilt. You deserve to forgive yourself, to release it. Maybe you won't pick up a drink, but I don't know about you. I certainly don't want you to suffer. That being said, my dear friends, I hope that if this resonates with you, you take that challenge on 30 days. And if you need any help and assistance, any type of guidance or advice, please feel free to drop me an email. I always love hearing from you. Much love from me to all of you, friends. Till next time.